My name is Zachary Sweats, and I'm the creator of BibleEmoji, the Bible translated with emojis, or as it's been called, Scripture for Millennials. I started BibleEmoji as a fun project on Twitter where my goal was to take the most translated book in human history and merge it with the language of social media, emojis. I started tweeting out verses one at a time, sharing them with the Twitter community, who immediately brought incredible feedback for how I could make the translation even better. This eventually led to the full publication of a complete King James Bible in emoji on the iTunes bookstore. Once it was released, it received a great deal of viral media fame from around the world. This was all done without a large-scale ad budget. And what I'd like to talk about today are three questions that the Emoji Bible raised among skeptics and fans alike, and also some of the underlying marketing themes that I think propelled it to success. The three questions that I'd like to talk about are we moving backwards? More specifically, is our language moving backwards? Also, aren't words important? And finally, is this trolling? First things first, though, are we moving backwards? One common criticism, if you will, was we're moving backwards, we're going back to the system of hieroglyphs. And I think this is really interesting, and I think it gets at the question of what is the goal of language? And the goal of language is to be able to articulate a thought from one person to another. It's a system of transmitting ideas. And I think one thing that emojis do extremely well, where words can sometimes fail, is we can express a very complete thought in a much less space, much smaller space. And the example that I want to give for that is the question, what is that? And what I've put on the screen here are the same phrase, what is that? The same question, but with three different emojis. There's the laughing emoji where you could imagine someone saying, what is that, in a hilarious way, or a sad emoji where it implies something not so good, or even an anger emoji where you're enraged by what you're seeing. And what we're able to do with an emoji is we're able to take three distinct, completely separate thoughts, and we're able to articulate them all within the same structure just by changing one emoji. This means that the user doesn't need to look around and search for context. They're able to convey the message through this language in a much faster time. And I think that's very powerful, especially in our modern world where we're starting to understand how people's attention spans can be a bit smaller, and we need to convey information even faster in a smaller space on our mobile phone. Another question that was raised aren't words important? And as Albert Mohler stated on Twitter, millennials, please insist on using words to translate the Bible. It's important. So I think this gets back to a similar question where, why do we value words? Well, words enable communication. They enable us to convey a message regardless. They enable us to communicate a message from one person to another. And I think this gets back at the underlying goal of emojis being a universal language where we can have one emoji that everyone in the world can understand, whereas we can't all speak everyone's unique language. The example I like to give are, if we're looking for words, what is the most effective word here in this example to signal for a taxi? We have the emoji word for taxi, which I believe everyone in this room probably would be able to recognize. But once we see the Chinese word, the Russian word, the Arabic word, all the different iterations of this one emoji for taxi, I think it's actually quite clear which is the most effective word in this example. Another thing that I'd like to point out is words can also convey empathy. And I think this is where emojis really fill in an incredibly needed gap in our digital communication today. All too often, we're left faceless behind our keyboards. We don't take the time to remember that there's another human behind the screen reading our messages and also ingesting what we say. And I think emojis are a really powerful way that we can convey that there is another human behind the screen. And I think this is a really powerful tool. And the example I'd like to give is when someone, lets me know that they don't enjoy it, I'll often respond, "I'm sorry," with a sad face emoji. And what I notice is that when you engage people in that human way by inspiring their emotions, revealing and communicating via empathy, we're able to really break down the barrier. And what I like to show here is people will go from feeling very angry at the emoji Bible idea to realizing, hey, there's a human behind this. And then they start to understand. And we can break down that barrier that's dividing us. And we can really communicate and be empathetic towards each other's situation. And I think that's a really powerful tool. The other thing I'd like to, or finally, I should say, the last question is this just an exercise in trolling? And what I'd like to respond to that is no, it is not. It is actually an exercise in marketing. And I'd like to give a little background on how some of the influence I had for doing BibleEmoji. And it came from reading this book called Contagious by Jonah Berger while I was on a plane one day. And in the book, he discusses the science of virality. And it's an incredibly good book. If anyone here hasn't read it or if you've already read it, it's a great read. And I'm not going to repeat his words verbatim, but I do want to point out two important features of his framework for why things catch on that I believe BibleEmoji really nailed, that gave it the ability to go viral in the way that it did. And I'm going to attempt to communicate these ideas to you in emoji. So the first is create social capital. And what I mean by this is give people something that when they share it with their friends makes them look cool. So my emojis here are the cool guy sharing on a phone. And I think BibleEmoji really nailed this in the sense where people could look cool or interesting or fun to their friends because they knew about it, and it ultimately what we share with one another is a reflection back on ourselves. So if we share things that are funny, we want other people to see us as funny. If we share things that are witty or intelligent, we want them to think that we are witty and intelligent. What we share, what we put out in the world is our social capital that we're hoping comes back on us. And something as marketers I think we all can think about is how can we make people look cool by sharing what we want them to share. And you have to get a little creative to figure this out. And the other thing that when you can combine it is when you can have a real world trigger. So what I'm attempting to show here is you need to not only share that idea with someone, but it should also be grounded in something that they encounter in their day-to-day lives. You want them to see something in the world that sparks the idea to remember what you put in their head so that they then are prompted to share that information that makes them look cool. So if you can combine these two things, creating something with great social capital that makes them look good by sharing or intelligent or funny or witty, And then you can link that as well to a trigger in the real world that they are likely to encounter that reminds them of the idea. That is a very powerful combination for virality. And I think BibleEmoji nailed this in a few ways where one, religion is something that is part of almost everyone's day to day. We're always seeing a church or encountering something that reminds us of religion. And once that you're reminded of religion, thought pops in your head, that's right, BibleEmoji, let me turn to the person next to me and talk about it. And I think it also had another trigger with just the use of emojis, where whenever people would see emojis, they would be reminded of BibleEmoji, which prompted them to share. These are just two of the ideas. Um, and that's the whole presentation for the day. But I did want to thank everyone so much for your time and your attention. If you'd like to contact me to chat any more, you can do so at ideasforstrangers.com. It's my personal website. I have a marketing blog and some good projects up there. And if you, as the name suggests, if you would like any ideas or help coming up with new ideas or ways that you can create social capital or find the trigger to ignite the idea, please feel free to reach out. I have a lot of ideas and I love to share them. You can also contact me on Twitter at SweatsEquity or at BibleEmoji, or on my personal email at zachary.sweats@gmail.com. Again, thank you so much for everyone's time and attention, and I appreciate the opportunity.